Hello, welcome to another one of these videos where I'm discussing several ways to improve strength of a particular muscle using more of a functional approach than trying to isolate it with one particular bodybuilding type exercise. So this one I'm really combined two muscles together because I found it very difficult to separate it. So I'm looking at the deltoids and the trapezius, probably more so the upper trapezius. So obviously these are both associated with many of the shoulder movements. So very first thing we start with, like in all the other videos, is mobility restrictions, and this one is thoracic extension. And Dylan here is just showing you a simple drill where you're just lying flat on the ground. It's okay to, you don't want to have your back dead flat. A lot of people try to have it dead flat, but you do need to be aware of trying to excessively arch through your lower back, which to make this look good. All right, so you need to have some degree of core stability here, but don't go flat. All right, now the other thing you really want to pay attention to is, can you keep your wrists or the back of your hand flat on the ground? So this part of your body you do want on the ground, all right? So, and what you're trying to do is get your arms up ahead, which is what you're going to try to do when you do a shoulder press, but ensure that you have adequate thoracic extension to do so. Poor thoracic extension would be what you see Dylan there, especially on this right hand. See how that's where this arm's moving forwards this way because his rib cage is basically not providing the mobility required. It may not be that, it could be also stiffness at the front of the shoulder, but we'll address that as well in a second. So this is a very simple drill. You can use this between sets of your harder strength exercises as well, but also tight lats can be a real problem in this as well. So, but it's very important to start with this first before you start trying to crush yourself with overhead movements, or you'll just end up with neck pain or shoulder pain or both. All right, so in combination with thoracic extension is also thoracic rotation. This is probably where we see a lot more rigidity. It's easier to spot than the other one. So I've featured this one several times in videos. There's many ways to do it. This is just probably one of the easiest ways, and it's very simple to use as a testing tool. So I just worked through the range of motion. Dylan's got excellent range of motion in this. So you should be able to basically work through around about that 180 degrees. So you can see how he's right up here. So someone who's stiff out this way or worse here, then you know that they're really going to struggle with overhead movement. It's probably not a good idea to start crushing them if you don't work on this first. All right, so again, works really well between sets of the harder exercises that I'll show you towards the end. It really ensures that you have everything you need to be able to do them right. All right, so once you've moved through that, then you need to look at some of the flexibility problems that may be getting in the way. So this is the simple scratch stretch you can use to identify if there's an imbalance on the right or the left. This is really going to indicate if there's incredible stiffness through your pecs or your lats or both of them that are going to impair you from moving to full range of motion. So Dylan's a little bit stiff and tight, but nothing disastrous that we would say, that nothing asymmetrical either. That's probably the more important. So he could work on some pec stretches and some lat stretches between the sets to try and improve things, but again, he doesn't have any pain present as well, so I wouldn't be overly concerned. Now, after I've done the simple mobility stuff, I work through stability. And now this wall slides drill, again, I've featured this so many times. It's so simple, but it's so effective. And basically, you're really trying to get your arms up above into this overhead movement, which you're going to, in a second, try with a dumbbell or a barbell. But you're making sure that you get there in the right way. So that before you start crushing it with strength, you make sure that you've got this good stability component working for you. Make sure you check the description under the video because I do have a bit of extra information because I'm only really quickly going through this. So the main thing for this wall slides is really like how the scapula moves, how it's assisting the arm to get into this overhead movement. So you're really trying to guide the scapula to come and wrap around the rib cage around like this. All right, so you're really encouraging it to come up and help the arm, as opposed to where the shoulder just shrugs straight up into the neck, and this is where the levator scap and all these sort of things go wrong. and why many people don't enjoy overhead movements, because they have this this really dysfunctional way of doing it that just creates pain. All right, so the wall slides, again, check the description in the video. There's a lot more more detailed articles and videos where I have other versions of this and go into a lot more detail. Just so that this video doesn't go for 45 minutes, I'm just giving you a process of how I might approach getting to the real tricky things. All right, so now I'm at the point where I'm going to this sort of strength stage. I could have thrown in push-ups and things like that as well, but we'll skip that and go to this kneeling overhead one. Now this is very similar to the wall slides. Obviously it's got load on it, so it's a lot more strenuous, but the kneeling position gives me a much more stable base, a lot less coordination. I don't have to really worry about too much here. And again, I can get this sort of feeling of wrapping the ribcage, what we were just doing then. Because I've removed all the complication, it gives the person a really good awareness to think about how this is moving, just like they were with the wall slides, right? So it's really the strength version of what we were just doing with the previously, where it was more stability based. And you can see here from the back how it's very similar, and it's also not a very vertical, it's coming out on that forward angle. All right, so a very useful exercise when you're trying to transition from horizontal pushing to vertical, but you've always had trouble in the past. All right, this is a nice little stepping stone that you can use. So once I've got the hang of that one and I want to go to vertical, I don't want to straight away load it. And that's where I'm going to use the inverted kettlebell that has inverted kettlebell press that has a real strong emphasis on stability combined with strength. So when you hold a kettlebell inverted, it's very unstable, like it's really hard to control. You really need a lot of control through the elbow and the wrist as much as the shoulder itself, but it's a great one where you can really work through the strength with minimal loads. It's very challenging, this one. You can never lift as much as you can with a dumbbell that's well balanced, or a barbell even. All right, so this is a nice one. Again, you can really work through the left and right, see if there's a deficit in things before you really challenge it with the bigger loads. All right, so that's a great, again, another great stepping stone to these more challenging ones to come. All right, so now we're at the point where we're going to move into dumbbell press. I will start with a single dumbbell before I move to two, and the reason is it just gives me a lot more freedom. Again, if you've had a history of thoracic stiffness and rigidity or problems there, this gives you a little bit more freedom before you start to try and crush it and annihilate it. So the simple squat press as well gives my legs that building of the leg drive into the upper body, so it really assists me with the movement. If I slow down this phase here, the lowering phase, I'm adding an eccentric component to the shoulders without any help from the legs. So that's a simple way to really build up time under tension, but in the strongest phase of the movement. All right, so it's a really clever way to build up your strength. Now, what Dylan was showing there is the simple version, but I prefer this one that he's about to do now, where it gets a little bit more power and leg drive again, but it adds a bit of a rotation element to it. So you'll see what I mean. Very similar to the Turkish get-up. All right, now this is another clever way to really get that scapula to really wrap around. You're actually giving it a mechanical advantage doing it this way. So it's a really clever way to avoid that shrugging into the neck that gives so many people issues. All right, so very demanding exercise, actually really puffs you out when you do this one. So it's quite a lot harder than it looks. All right, so again, I will start with all these single ones before I move into double ones where there's no freedom. You don't have any ability to move. If there's anything wrong, it's going to go straight into it. So you're really just minimizing the risk, finding the best exercise with the least amount of risk. So this is where we start to move into barbell with the two-arm one again. So Dylan's just loading a barbell, and this is where we use the Viking press. So very much that similar squat stance again, but now we've got a barbell, so we have got two arms. We've got more of a neutral grip than a pronated grip, so it gives him a little bit of extra help again. And then it's very similar to that kneeling one and the wall slides before, so it's not entirely vertical. As you can see here, we're more on this angle here as opposed to going straight up. So it gives him a lot better chance of succeeding and getting some strength into the deltoids and the upper trapezius with the least amount of things going wrong that ends up with pain in the neck or even the shoulder itself. All right, and again, and this is where it's the functional element comes into it, because you really need to have good squat form on all of these ones. If you've got a problem with the squat, you're going to have problems in the upper body and the shoulders. All right, so now once we move from the Viking press, now we go back to the dumbbells, and we're going to make it a little bit more explosive. So we've gone from just mobility to basic stability to basic strength to more integrated strength. Now it's going to be more about integrated power. So power is where we start to move with much more explosive force. So the speed of it is much more different. Now coordination on this one's a little bit tricky as well. So this is really just a weightlifting move. A bit easier with dumbbells. If you screw it up, it's not as hard to handle as a barbell. So Dylan's going to do what we call a split jerk. So he's going to start with the dumbbells on his shoulder, lower into a partial squat, and then explode up and into this partial lunge stance. All right, so it's really like creating, this is where you can apply much bigger loads and use the speed of it to force it up there. All right, and this is where you're probably seeing now for the first time the lunge stance. And we're also working vertically. All right, so it's a lot different movement to the other ones. The speed of it's probably the biggest difference. All right, another exercise that's very demanding on the cardiovascular side of things. So a lot of people are quite surprised how worn out they can be in a very short amount of time. So it's a great way to build some strength into the deltoids, the upper traps, and basically everything that's just working in that overhead pushing movement. Obviously, then the next thing, once you've got the dumbbells, then I move into the barbell. You can see how I started everything with singles, and now I'm finishing everything with doubles. The barbell being the last one because it's the trickiest one. So I'm just going to speed it up here so we can see Dylan get this done. All right, so very much like your jerk in the weightlifting or in your Olympic lifts. So without the clean, so if you're just doing repeated jerks, obviously it's going to be a bit lighter. If you've got the clean in it, you're not really going to be knocking out 10 reps. But if we're trying to build some strength or just integrate the power, it's going to be a bit lighter. All right. And also that rack position, if we were doing cleans, we would want to see that rack position when he's got it here, where the elbows would be out here. So, so as you can see, his elbows are down. We'd want to see that nice rack position where the elbows are out horizontal. But for this point, if we're just using it for this specific purpose of building strength into there, that's how we might get this one done. All right. So now the last two are a little bit more complicated. So we're going to have a look at those. And this is probably leads more into the deltoids. And again, it brings in high speed, but this time brings in agility. So you've got a lot more things to contend with. So let's have a look at those ones. Okay, so this last one that we're going to look at is where we're probably looking at the old lateral raise exercises. You can see here, Dylan, and this is like in the integrated version. So we've all seen this one many times before, and bodybuilders tell us it's to build strength into the lateral deltoid, and maybe it does. It definitely works the trapezius as well, so it doesn't work it independently, but I don't really like the exercise where people are just standing there and lifting it like so. I find it just does more damage and harm. There's much better ways to train the shoulders than that, but this one is an example of where I might actually use that movement, but you'll see it's heavily dependent on what's happening with the legs. So this very first one is where we're using a lateral lunge. So lining up in the lateral lunge, which requires bending action, which is a deadlift action. There's just so many moving pieces in this. You've got great thoracic mobility. This is very sports orientated, as you'll see in a second. So that's where I'll start with the simple version. Now I'll lead it into a lateral bound. So now I'm including a bit of a mobility, and you can see there's a bit of stability requirement there. Massive amount of leg drive. All right, so this is a very simple way of just building in the lateral raise into sort of some sport-specific drill. And then I could really speed it up, turn it into plyometrics. So you can see how he shortened his step. Even he's probably still too slow, but probably the slow motion doesn't help. But you really add a bit of a change of direction movement to this. All right, so if I just bring it back to where we were at the beginning, at the end there. So I could do a lot of things with this movement here where I could even continue to make it harder. In the past I've added like rubber tubing, and it's creating an sort of really overspeed element to it. And the foot plant, so this is where we use this a lot for preventing ACL injuries and building incredible change of direction speed. And you see that landing position there's perfect landing position, so that then they can instantly learn how to explode back the other way. The arm part is very useful, a bit like in ice skating, how you really need the arm drive to help you create that core thing. So this is where adding the load to the arm helps to encourage it, and the added bonus is really the deltoids and upper traps. But so they're definitely working because of using that movement, but it really is so much about everything else, to be honest. But if I'm making a video about functional ways to increase the strength, it doesn't really get much better than these ones. So the lateral movements, most people suck moving laterally as well, so this is where we see a lot of the injuries, a lot of the weaknesses, a lot of coordination deficits, everything that makes people slow in sports. So there's just so many great things associated with these type of movements, and this is a clever way to build that in there. And getting out of that bodybuilding, trust me, you keep increasing the weight on that arm is really going to get tired, but your leg will probably be hammered before the leg, which is the way it should be. All right, so again, check the description on the video. I'll leave you some links to articles with extra information about agility training and lateral bounds and ACL injuries, shoulders, everything. All right, so everything I've just really quickly skimmed over, I'll give you the missing pieces to it all if you check the links below. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed the series of videos that I did. They took quite a while to do, so I'll probably continue doing some more that are going to be on the smaller muscle groups that are more stabilising orientated. And if you have any other ideas, just shoot them through and we'll see if we can get them done. All right. Okay. Hope you enjoy that, and see you next time.